Welcome to Between the Lines, where we explore the intersection of local and national issues. I'm your host, Eben Diskin, editor of the Townie, and today we are talking about elections, their local significance, what it takes to organize and inform voters, and engage people. This is particularly relevant since we have one coming up pretty soon. And today, to help us talk about this, we are joined by Jared Hubbard. Jared's the co-chair of the Newburyport Democratic City Committee. Jared moved to Newburyport nearly a decade ago. Outside of local politics, he's a lawyer for a software company and an adjunct professor at Northeastern University School of Law. And we have Connie Preston. Connie is a retired biotech executive who served as an At Large City Councillor for 4 years, but is not seeking re-election. She's currently training to become a court advocate for people experiencing domestic violence after her term on the council ends. Thanks for being here, guys. Appreciate you spending a beautiful day outside, inside with me. I feel like I say that every time I need to start scheduling these when it's raining out.
Thanks so much for having us. It's really nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Absolutely, thank you. So we got a local election coming up. We see the lawn signs. We've seen op-eds on both sides of issues, supporting different candidates. In this way, there's a lot of similarities between local and national elections. But why do local elections feel different? They are different, but what makes them different? By nature, elections are divisive, but local elections divide differently than national. And how do you think about this?
Want me to go first? Yeah. So, I agree with you. I feel much more empowered in local elections, I think, than I do on a national scale. I think particularly living in a state like Massachusetts, where, let's just say I am a Democrat, lifelong Democrat, and I think it would be really frustrating to be a Republican living in Massachusetts. So I'm glad to be here in a state that generally agrees with me. But, I do feel much more empowered to make a difference in local elections than I do on a national stage. And for me, it just hits a lot harder, or a little closer to the heart, I think, with local elections, because of the fact that I feel like I have more skin in the game, and it's somewhere that I'm looking to put more of my energy because I feel like I might be able to make a difference.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say thank you to Connie and all of the retiring city councilors. I mean, it is not an easy job, and we, in order to have elections, we have to have people stand up and run for office. So thank you, Connie.
Thank you.
I do think. I mean, I agree. I think that you can have. It's interesting because we have, when you look at the number of people coming out to vote, more people come out and vote in the big national elections than in the local elections. But on the other hand, the local elections have really a far more sort of direct effect on our daily lives. I mean, if the streets get paved, matters more than sort of the intricacies of tax policy in D.C. a lot of times. Not to say that what happens in D.C. doesn't have a big impact, right. But I think that you can have a much larger impact locally. Both as an individual, it's small. You can get to know your local representatives in a way that it's far more difficult to get to know your congressperson or your senator. And so I think that that's sort of how it changes. But I think people get passionate on both locally and nationally. But it does seem it's sort of the national news is omnipresent here in Newburyport, and so it's interesting that way.
Yeah, can I add a little bit on that? So I definitely don't want anybody to leave this conversation and think that I'm not impassioned about national politics. I most certainly am. But again, it feels so hard to make a difference there, and it seems so much more tangible to make a difference here. But I'm really glad that Jared brought up that point about elections in preparation of this. I actually looked up in what the percentage of our turnout in the city is, and I think it's really important to say this. So with the debt exclusion vote for the rec center, we had 26% that showed up, right? And of about 15 to 15,100 voters, depending on which election you're talking about, for our last municipal election. So that would be the just city councilors city councilors and school committee 2 years ago. We had 30% show up, right? However, at the last presidential election, we had 80%. So people do know how to get out and vote, but for whatever reason, they're not coming out around the municipal elections. And I most certainly hope with our upcoming election on November 4th that we will certainly see more than 30%. But on average, you really are seeing somewhere in that 30% for the non-national elections, which is disheartening.
Yeah, and we had in the last mayoral election, it was higher, right? It was 50%.
I don't think it quite hit 50, but it was in the
around
40s.
50,
Yeah.
Exactly.
which is considered incredible for a local election, which, 50% of turnout, maybe not so incredible,
Yeah.
but the standard is fairly low. And it's funny that it works out that way because, like you were saying, local elections impact people on a day-to-day basis a lot more
So
than
much more.
national elections, which isn't to discount the impact of national elections, but you maybe know the candidates in local elections. You see them at Market Basket. They're trying to advocate for paving your street or funding your kid's school, and yet it's so much harder to get people to care about that.
Yeah.
Why do we think that is?
So, in thinking about this, I think, one of the things is the national news is just omnipresent, right? You know how, whichever way you want to go on the presidential election, you know what they've done, and it is broadcast, and every single day it comes into your home, everything. I think, when you talk about the last council election, right, there are 11 spots on the council, right? And like this year, we've got 15 people who are running. It takes when we have great local media, including the Townie, including the Daily News, but it takes a lot more effort for people to get to know, all of those, to actually get to know people, right? You can meet them. It's great that you can meet them one-on-one. You can really get to know them. But on the other hand, it takes much more effort. You're not sort of bathed in it like we feel like on some of the national news. And I think that, if you're, if I'm going to be out there voting and I've not been, not closely followed local politics, and there's 15 names on a ballot, am I going, it's not like, they used to have the League of Women Voters, right? They would come out, here's the position for each of the candidates, here's your sort of voting guide that you can take in the voting booth. We don't have anything like that nowadays. And so you have to go out and do your research. You have to go, and fortunately, there's some great forums and town halls and debates and everything coming up. So you can do that, but it takes effort. It takes hours of your time often to go and sort of research that. And I think people are reluctant to vote where they're not informed. And on the other hand, if you think the city's well run and you're not really concerned about things, maybe it's not worth spending hours trying to figure that out and figure out which among these 15 names do I want to vote for. I think that plays a big part in it.
I would actually go a little bit different on that. I fear that there's a good amount of people locally that are going out to vote that are going out relatively uninformed. And I say that as someone who, of course, has run for office twice now. My first time uncontested, my second time contested. I think the debates, the forum, thank you so much for the forum that you're having next Wednesday night. Is it Wednesday?
Yep, Wednesday.
Because I think it is so important that people get educated around their votes. But what I find challenging is at a lot of those, I see the same faces over and over and over and over again, right? And it most certainly is not the 4,000 people who are getting out to vote. Hopefully, some of those people are getting out and are going to meet and greets for the different various candidates and getting to know people. But I think there are a lot of people who are voting for X because they know Susie, and Susie said to vote for X or Y, or I like Susie, and Susie has a yard sign for X, and so I'm going to vote for X. And, that to me is so disheartening. I mean, we as candidates, we spend a lot of money on those yard signs. Not because we love, I in particular, I don't know if you remember this, for 2 years or 4 years ago, my face was on those signs. There is nothing more painful than going to Market Basket and seeing your face 50 times, right? Like, it's awful. Nobody wants that.
I think we got to get more creative with the signs. I
No,
get
right?
that,
But people vote based on yard signs, I think, a lot. And
Yeah.
I applaud people who are getting out and voting, but I give extra credit to the people who are getting out and voting in an informed fashion.
So is the issue that not enough people are voting and that we have this 30%, or is the issue that we have too many uninformed people voting? And both can be true.
I would argue both are the problem. I think, full stop, if, we need to get more educated voters, and we need to get more voters in general. I mean, 30% is, I don't know, I can't say for certain because I'm not that young anymore, but I don't know that I've ever missed an election in my life, that I've never not voted. But 30% of the 15,000-ish registered voters in Newburyport are showing up to vote, and that's disheartening.
And this is the problem with local politics, because it's so neighborly and intimate, is that people are voting based on familial relationships.
For sure.
And it's hard not to.
Yeah.
You know, if your family friend is running for something, how do you not vote for it? If you see more lawn signs on your way to the supermarket, and you're not paying attention otherwise, maybe you're going to like, well, that person seems like they've got the wind at their back. That's good. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. It feels pure because it's local and you know these people and maybe you grew up with them, but that by the same virtue, you're using things to vote that maybe shouldn't be factors in your decision.
Yeah, and I will admit, so I've lived in Newburyport, my husband and I, for about the last 11, almost 12 years now. Prior to that, I lived in Cambridge for 22 years, and I've said this multiple times, so I'm not necessarily outing myself. I was one of those people who wasn't paying a lot of attention. You know, I was very busy with my day job, and, you know, I was not really paying attention to politics. You know, I didn't really know who my city councilors were, who was the mayor in Cambridge at the time. But I was still getting out and voting. But I was probably one of those people who was voting based on yard signs more than, you know, most. But at least I was there. I would argue I was still not really doing my civic duty by voting in an uneducated fashion.
Right.
But boy, getting involved with politics, I am doing everything I can to push people, including doing this, to push people out to get educated and vote as a whole.
Right.
And I think it's so important, and I'm ashamed that it took me so long to figure it out. But I did figure it out, and, you know, no matter where anybody is in the game, getting there, whether you're 90 years old or 18 years old and this is the first time you're voting, get educated and get out there.
I do think that, I think, you know, it is great to say everyone should be an educated voter. I think two things. One is that I think it is sometimes it's difficult to get educated, even if you go to the debate, right? You know, you haven't, you know, there are people in town who, and I mean, my hobby is local politics, right? This is why I you know, volunteered to serve on the NDCC, right? Is because this is what I enjoy doing. But people don't, you know, they don't follow every city council meeting. They don't follow every vote. It takes a lot of time and effort and energy to do that. I mean, I don't even do that, and I enjoy this stuff. But I think that, so it's tough to get informed in the month before. I mean, you try, you go and you meet people, and a lot of it is, hey, do I like this person? Do I trust this person? Right? Do I think they're going to do a good job? I mean, we live in a representative democracy where we entrust people, our representatives, to represent us, to figure out the issues with, you know, the sewers and the streets and the schools, to figure out all of those issues. And I think it's, so a lot of that is trust and figuring out that trust. And I think if there's people that we trust that say, hey, I know I have followed this, and I know this person's a good person. I mean, those type of recommendations, we see them in the letters to, you know, letters to the editor and recommendations, right? People recommend, you know, hey, I've support this person because of X, Y, or Z. And I think that's important. It's important to see, who are my neighbors supporting? Well, I mean, and that is the yard signs, right? Who are my neighbors supporting? I like those neighbors. Okay, if I don't know very much, I'm going to support the same person. Because, you know, getting to be a truly informed voter where you know, like, what the votes have been and everything is very, very difficult and very time consuming. And so a lot of it is, we have to rely on that trust. I mean, the same goes nationally, right? I don't follow everything that goes on with you know, every vote that our, you know, Congressman Moulton makes, but I rely on people I trust to raise if there's issues, or you know, to feature what, you know, what are the issues that he cares about, what are the issues that I care about, and sort of, you know, match those.
Can I just add something to that? I agree. However, the caveat to me around that, and someone who's, you know, deeply involved in local politics, is, you know, a lot of people come with their inherent biases, right? Including myself, right? I say to people, if people ask my opinion about who I'm voting for whatever it is, I will give them their opinion, but at the end of it, I will say, don't take my word for it. I hate being told what to do in general. I most certainly hate being told how to vote on something. And I will always say, this is me. This is where I'm at. This is how I'm coming at it. But I have my own biases in this. Listen to the other side. Like, get educated on both sides of everything. Don't always just take someone's word for it, because a lot of the people, especially the people that are heavily involved in local politics, a lot of those people have their own personal biases. And, I hate to think that people are, following too closely because of the bias that people come from it. And another way to say that, I have spoken to people who have yard signs in their yard for a particular candidate, whatever way that goes, who aren't going to vote for those candidates, who have said, I didn't know how to say no to that sign, so I just took it, but I'm not going to vote for them. And, so that is out there. So if if you like Susie, your neighbor, and Susie has a certain sign, you can't always know that Susie is truly supporting. I don't know why Susie is my person today.
Susie for president.
Susie, whoever you are. But, there are a lot of biases in the way people, especially I think in municipal elections.
Sure. And no one knows the right answer, right? No matter how engaged you are.
Yeah.
And that's like one thing I've discovered through doing this is how engaged a core group of people are.
Yes.
And when I had Dave Rogers, editor of the Daily News, on a few episodes ago, he talked about the 5% of, and then which that later upgraded to 8% of hyper engaged people who follow local politics closely. And that's an estimate, so I don't know if that's the correct or incorrect. But the point is,
you can never
there are people who go to all the meetings and they take notes and they disseminate those notes, and then they're trying to inform people, and they have their own biases, and they write op-eds.
Sure.
And yes, they are hyper engaged. They are probably more knowledgeable of what's going on than most people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the biases and the analysis they attach to those notes is true all the time.
Yes.
And so how do you always need to come at these things with a degree of critical thinking and individual kind of evaluation of how you feel about the information that's coming out. And it's hard. There's no right answer, and no one knows the right answer until a policy gets pushed through and it works or doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
I got into politics. It's sort of funny. So when I retired, I was blessed to be able to retire young. But when I retired, I definitely retired with an eye toward getting community engagement. But to me, that really meant, volunteering for a number of things. It never meant politics. Politics has never really been my thing. But I was, of all things, the chair of the Tree Commission, which seemed so innocuous at the time. But from there, I had to go to council meetings every now and then, very, infrequently. But I would go to council meetings and I'd be like, oh my God, there's no one here. And, there's like a couple people at the same couple of people at all the meetings. And they certainly did not seem like somebody who was representative of me, right? And so it was a slow process. I was somewhat reluctant to get myself involved in it. But, it was that realization of the fact that there really aren't many people paying attention, and that I did have the capacity and time to do this, and that, ultimately it was incumbent on me as someone who does have that capacity to really get involved. And, that was sort of how I bled my way into this, but it definitely wasn't rah, yay, I want to be a city councillor someday. And then from there, it's just been so very eye-opening about how very little of, how very few people are really, really paying attention. And that's amazing to me.
Yeah, I'm getting people off we talked about this the last episode. Getting people off the sidelines is one of the big challenges, and getting
so
the right people off the sidelines too. To really care and to volunteer for something, whether it's apolitical or in city council or mayor or whatever it might be.
I mean, just getting people to run in general. I mean, my first term, the entirety of the council ran unopposed, which is, it's insane.
I wanted to ask you about that because we have quite a few unopposed races this year, cycle. Yeah, how do you feel about
four unopposed for the city council, and all of them on the school committee. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How do you guys
right?
feel about that? I mean, for me,
it's well, I will say so. having run both opposed and unopposed, boy, is it easier to run unopposed.
Yeah.
And a lot cheaper, a lot more time. But at the same token, you know, and again, my first term I ran unopposed. My second term I was in a competitive election. I worked so much harder the second time, and you know, as much as I enjoyed not having competition the first time and really just, you know, skating into my seat, the truth is it makes you so much more honest as a candidate to have to really get out there and get people to support you, get behind you, get money, help you run your campaign, you know, because it's way harder than it looks. It's so much harder than it looks, and it's nearly impossible, especially if you're running at large. Just so everybody understands, people that are running for a ward seat, only people in your ward can vote for you. So to go out and canvass, you would only have to canvass within your own ward. As an at-large, the entirety of the city can vote for you, but you also have to canvass for the entire city, right? So you got to make door hangers for the entire city. You got to get out in every single neighborhood as an at-large, and I was at-large, am at-large, I guess. But it made me so much more in tune with the public to have to go out there
and talk to people
and really understand what people are looking for, as opposed to just sitting down in that seat, you know. But yeah, I mean, the idea of having all 11 seats 4 years ago now uncontested, I mean, to me, democracy sort of dies when your vote doesn't count.
Exactly.
For
There's no choice.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's really disheartening for me now. You know, wards 1, 3, 4, and 5 all are uncontested right now, right? So all of those people are new, with the exception of the Ward 1 councillor, who has been in there for quite a few years, and I think has run uncontested for quite a few years. All the other seats, they're brand new councillors, and they're not even being challenged for those seats, right? Which is, it's just hard.
And I gotta say, when I learned that, I was disheartened, but then when I started to reach out to people for the meet and greet for Wednesday and for the candidate forms I sent out, and kind of trying to ways to educate voters about who these people are, even if they're uncontested, I was heartened by the response, and that the people who are running uncontested are still, you know, happy to show up and want to meet voters, and they want to fill out the form and have their profile made public on what they think on certain issues. And they're you know, I do think that they are showing an enthusiasm and a willingness to kind of engage on issues that as though they were contested, which I do appreciate.
The one thing I'll say about that, sorry if I just may, is you know, the local newspaper does not, they only have debates for the contesteds, right? And of course you can't debate nobody, but I would love to see, and I'm not necessarily blaming the paper here, but because I know it is very hard to do all of these things, right? But I would love if they still had forums where these people do at the very least have to stand up and say what their, you know, stance is on certain issues and those sorts of things. And you know, the year that we all ran uncontested, there was no debate, there was no nothing. Like there was just, you know, nothing. And it's that's really disheartening, because at the very least, people should have to stand up and say what their stance is on issues and such. And if you're running uncontested, that just doesn't happen. So yes, it's wonderful that you're having this forum where even the uncontested folks will be there and people can at least meet them and have conversations. But you know, this is really that first place where that's happening. And so we need more of that. Yeah.
I will say there's two types of uncontested races, right? I mean, you have uncontested races where it's a long-time incumbent and people don't jump in because, you know, it's sort of a fool's errand, right?
Right. Or they're happy with the job that person's done, and they that's different.
Or even if they're not happy, it's just, you know, I mean, like you know, there's been no Democrat running in the state Senate race, you know, here in Newburyport the last couple of times, because it's our current state senator has 30 years in office, right, almost. And so, you know, those are very difficult races to get in. You'd really have to want it, and I mean, it's not easy to run. But then again, there's uncontested races where basically you're hoping somebody stands up and only one person stands up, and you don't have a contest, you don't know how the person's going to do. And I do think I think particularly for, unfortunately we haven't had one of those for mayor, but I think for the council, I think it's not an easy job. It's tough right now. And Connie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's only one current councillor who has school-age children. There's going to be another one. The Ward 5 councillor has school-age children. The presumptive Ward 5 councillor. But I mean, it's not an easy job. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of work to do if you do it right. You have to meet with voters. I think, to the extent that we can make the job, and sometimes, I mean, personally, I think sometimes they make the job too hard, right? There's too many meetings. I mean, they just changed it to meeting every 3 weeks instead of every 2. But I mean, I think sometimes there's issues that come before the council, and including, when local parades, right, that are routine and everything. Some of those things, we could make the job easier to make it encourage more people to get involved, because otherwise it takes a really serious commitment. I mean, we do at the NDCC. I mean, we've held the last 2 cycles. We've held recruitment events to try and get people informed about what it takes to be a counselor. Connie's spoken at both of those. And try to recruit people. I mean, and many of those people who were there at those events are now running for council, which is great. But I think it's, we want to encourage more people to run for council, and to do that, to try to make it where it's not, yes, running is going to be difficult, but then once you get there, you can really, you're more focused on getting things done than on, a lot of, I mean, some of the meetings are 3-4 hours long, and it's difficult particularly if you have, if you have kids or loved ones that you have to care for.
Yeah, I always say, I don't have children and I don't have a day job anymore, but I don't know how somebody works full time, has kids, and is on council, because, again, as someone who doesn't have a day job and doesn't have kids, I find it really overwhelming sometimes, right? It is so much harder than people think it is, and including myself before I got on council. It takes so much time, not only just the meetings, but, having phone calls and, just getting through all your emails, sometimes in text and all these things, and meeting with staff around issues. It's a lot of time and effort. And, Jared is right. So maybe 6 months ago now, we changed our cadence of our council meetings to every 3 weeks, as opposed to we used to meet every other week, in an effort to try to streamline how much time we're spending on council, but also to allow, council meetings are sort of the big banner moments. The real work is happening in committees in between those council meetings, because it just, for everyone's edification, the way council works is whatever the issue is, it comes into the council. The council, by charter, has to vote it out to a committee. The work is supposed to get done in the committee. The committee votes on it in a certain way. They hold a series of meetings. The other councilors can come and, watch that discussion, participate in it if it is a council of the whole meeting, and then from there that issue comes back to council for a full vote. So that's where we, but the real work is happening in the committees. And what we found is things were needing to be held over in committee and be in multiple committee meetings to be able to get all the work done between council meetings. And so the idea was to try to cut down on the work in the timeliness, or the amount of time spent in council meetings, but allow for more work in committee. And I, for one, have found this much more helpful. It's we've run into a lot of challenges with appointments because of the cadence, if somebody can't show up, and all these things, but I think it's a better cadence. But the other thing that, getting back to the point of how do we get more people to engage, and this is something we as counselors talk about a lot, is the 2-year cycle. So couple of things. One, and this is not something the administration nor the council can change, but all 11 of us run on the same cycle, which gives me heartburn, because so let's say all 11 seats were contested this year, right? You could potentially have a new mayor and 11 new city councilors, i.e. everybody in city government would be brand new and has no idea what they're doing. And, no matter how many council meetings you've watched, you don't really know how to be a counselor until you've gotten in the job and actually done it for a little while. So I do think, much like school committee, so there are 6 school committee members, and they run in 3-year cycles offset from each other. So each 3 years, 3 of them run, and then
I
the
was
next
surprised
year
when I
beyond.
learned that everyone was up for election at the same time.
It's insane, right? But the other side of that is the council, so the mayor is on a 4-year term, the school committee is on a 3-year term, and then the council is on a 2-year term. And the challenge with a 2-year term is you're sort of always turning over, right? Like you just get to know each other, you're getting a groove on, and then you're back to an election season, right? Which, so, there's a con to the 2 years, there's a negative to being on 2-year cycles. However, we've talked a lot about if we were to up it to a 3 or a 4-year term, does that drive even more people away? Like, it's so much work. Do people really want to do it
Yeah,
for 3
no,
and
there's
4
no,
years? So
easy answer.
there's no easy answer.
I think we do 1-week terms. Bring you in for a vote, for one vote.
Oh my God, we
You're out.
The old Athenian style
You don't have to worry about
democracy,
repercussions because then you're out. You bring someone else in, they vote on something, you're gone. It's easy.
Yeah, maybe more people would show
Yeah.
up if they only had to do it
just
for a
1 week.
week, right?
Yeah, it's like city council fantasy camp. You know?
But
Easy.
I mean, to that point, it really, you get there, and I had, like I said, I had been on the tree commission, I had been on the last charter commission as well, so I at least had an idea of what Robert's rules are and all that sort of thing, right? But you show up, and I remember asking, so you get elected, you go in, the clerk sort of sits you down and sort of explains some things to you, and I'm like, how do I know if something's an order or an ordinance? And they're like, well, that's a good question.
Yeah, the few I've
there's
watched on Zoom, I'm like, I don't understand half the jargon
Exactly.
in this.
And
I'm like, this is
and the truth is, the first 6 months as a counselor, you're just sort of following along because
Yeah.
it's all so very new. You're just getting to know the staff. You're just really getting to develop relationships with the other counselors. You are just sort of following along. You're drinking from a fire hose the whole time, right? So you get elected, you got 6 months till you're really feeling on terra firma, and then you got maybe a year, but then you're back into the election cycle
election
again. So it's just that
yeah.
it's hard.
Well,
but again, if we make it a 4-year term, then maybe nobody will.
Right.
We'll
Yeah, it's too
have
much of a
uncontested elections without even people running in some
Yeah.
places.
But I do think, Evan, you raised a good point in terms of, if you're coming in as someone who's not sort of deep into the weeds on this stuff, right? And even me, like coming in, and I'm a lawyer by training, right? So some of this, the Roberts rules, all of that, pretty par for the course. But the different jargon and some of these issues go on for years, and so all the counselors are well versed in them. And if you're coming in for the first time, it's like it's like listening to a different language, right? And I think that's one thing that I think the council needs to constantly keep in mind, and that all the elected officials need to keep in mind, is if we want people to be involved in local politics, we need to simplify it. We need and simplify it for voters, because if it takes 6 months, not for voters, obviously it's a different learning curve, but if it takes a long learning curve for voters to understand what the council is doing, then it makes it so it's very difficult for them to participate in their democracy in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I almost think that's why people gravitate toward national politics, because I think it's simplified, and I think the messengers on the national stage know how to simplify issue, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah.
Simplify issues in a way that will resonate with people, and I don't know if that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I do think that they make it more salient that way, and I want to speak a little bit to the NDCC. Because this is kind of a true bridge of local and national politics. And what I've always felt about local politics is it's supposed to transcend party. That's what's good about it. It doesn't matter. The candidates don't run as Democrats or Republicans. They run for whatever issues that they care about. And so what do you see the NDCC's role as in the community? Because we were talking a little before we started recording.
Yeah.
There really is no NRCC
Right.
that is robust and has the same kind of footprint that you guys do. So what's the role? How do you guys kind of function in a town like this, and what impact do you try to have?
So, I mean, our general, we are a sort of a branch of the Massachusetts, the state party, state Democratic Party, and which is of a branch of the National Democratic Party. So, I mean, our sort of remit is to promote Democratic candidates for local, state, and federal office. And then also, I mean, we are out there trying to educate voters. We put on programs. We've had Sean Gallagher, who's the superintendent of the schools, come and speak about schools. Last month we had a forum on housing affordability where we brought in several speakers on housing affordability. So we try to sort of educate our membership about local, state, and sometimes federal issues. Generally, the federal, there's plenty of people talking about that. So a lot of times we focus more on the local and state issues. For example, when the ballot initiatives, every other year they'll have ballot initiatives. So last year I think there were 4 or 5 ballot initiatives. I think it was 5 ballot initiatives, and so we brought in speakers for and against both of those, or most of those ballot initiatives, in order to be able to educate people on those and know about them. And so, that's sort of what we view our role as. I mean, I view it in our community here in Newburyport. There's really not. And we're not, while we are a partisan organization, I mean, our meetings are open to the public, they're open to everybody. If you're unenrolled, and 63% of Newburyport is unenrolled, right? Only 26% are registered Dems. But if you're unenrolled, then, you feel free to come and come to our meetings. You don't have to join the party. If you just want to learn about the topic at hand, learn about the what's going on in your community. And so that's sort of what I view that what we're doing. And it's sort of the best conversation in town, outside of obviously the council meetings, but the best conversation in town, and always, sometimes a little clearer in terms of people being able to just speak directly to an audience about what's going on with particular issues that we try to do deep dives on.
Is there a sense that people's candidates' national political leanings seep into their local platforms? Because, so say for instance, the forum you guys are hosting on 16th.
Oh, no, 14th.
14th.
October 14th.
That only open to Democratic enrolled candidates, which makes sense here at NDCC. So that's an effort to spotlight these candidates who are enrolled Democrat. Is that because there's an idea that what they would do locally aligns with your kind of broader, more philosophical ideology? Is that kind of how that works? Or?
Yeah, in general, yes. I think there's also, the people that start on the city council or start as mayors, they go on to become, congressmen and senators and otherwise. I think generally, though, I mean, we don't see the same issues nationally as we do locally.
Right.
I think certainly in some communities you might. Here in Newburyport, like I said, there's 26% registered Dems. But on the other hand, during the last presidential election, when 80% of Newburyporters voted, 70% went for Kamala Harris, right? Went for the Democratic candidate. So it is a Democratic-leaning town.
Right.
And I mean, you see that too with the candidates for local office. Of the 15 people running for city council, 5 are unenrolled, 10 are registered Democrats. And so I think you see that sort of, and I think you see more Democrats than what you see, in the numbers, the 26% overall, because people who are registered Dems and people who attend these meetings and do this, they're more interested in politics. They're more interested in that. And as a Democrat, we support our community. We want a stronger community. I'm from Texas originally, and I went back there during an election a couple of years ago, and there's billboards and bounties offered for doctors offering abortions, and I mean it was like it was crazy. Yeah. And it's like I come back to Newburyport, it's like, oh, our city works, our parks work. Right. We have on the state level, it's pretty much run by the Democrats, and we have one of the best states in the country, right, with the top education system in the country. Not to say we don't have problems, but I think we sort of see we see that, and we promote Democrats up and down the ticket from the NDCC.
So you acknowledge the separation of issues federally and locally, but then see the value as promoting Democratic candidates as a kind of pipeline for potential more statewide or national.
Well, as a
stage.
pipeline, but
Yeah.
also because, I mean, generally
Values based.
Generally values based. I mean, right? We, you know, as Democrats, we care about other people. We care about schools. We care about housing affordability. You know, these are all issues that we care about. And the people that are running, generally that are registered Democrats and running as Democrats, not all, right? I mean, it's a big tent party, but like, you know, they will care about similar issues, and so we want to, you know, promote that and promote people to be able to hear from those candidates. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm always just interested in the main difference between local and national politics being party loyalty, and how we're so beholden to party loyalty nationally, and how locally it seems like, you know, I don't actually know before I, you know, looked at the information about the forum. I really didn't know what party anyone was affiliated with.
Yeah.
And you know, I do think it matters to some extent, but that you're almost free from party, and that's what makes
They are nonpartisan
local
elections, right? Yeah.
Sure, exactly. And that's what makes it so pure and special is local elections.
I think that's really important to point out. I don't think a lot of people locally really realize that municipal elections are nonpartisan. You know, I mean, you know, I'm certainly a Democrat. I have a lifelong Democrat. You know, both of the mayoral candidates that we have, both Macaulay and Reardon, are both Democrats. You know, but nobody thinks about it. You know, there are no primaries for Republicans and Democrats in municipal elections, and no, certainly, you know, for me as someone on council, like, I don't go to the floor and think about who's a Republican, who's a Democrat. I honestly don't even really know, other than whether or not they're part of the NDCC with me or not. It's the only reason that I actually know. But you know, I mean, that's very important. Like, it just doesn't break that way. Like, we don't fall along party lines that way. But also, well, I have the floor for a second about the NDCC. I just want to say, so I only joined probably about 5-ish years ago, right around the same time that Karen Trowbridge took over. And, you know, Jared's taken a leadership role lately, but, you know, Karen has been there, and I just really want to give such a shout out to Karen Trowbridge, because, man, she has done so much with that organization over the last 5 years.
She really has.
I have been a little remiss, I will fully admit, being a counselor. I am at council meetings 4 nights a week, you know, finding yet another night of my week to go to a meeting. I've been a little remiss over the last couple of years. I hope come January to get more involved with the NDCC again. But Karen has just done an amazing job, really getting more membership, people more engaged, really creating an organization that is a really valuable asset to the community.
Yeah, and no, she has, and I mean, and it goes a little bit. I mean, Karen, after the last federal election, you know, was a little burned out, right? A lot of us as Democrats were a little burned out by what was happening in Washington D.C. And so, you know, I stepped up. She's fortunately staying as co-chair and continuing to do a magnificent job. But I think that you know, we've seen and you know, hopefully we're pushing back and getting people more involved. But I mean, people were earlier this year really burned out on politics and on seeing what's happening.
Yeah.
I think that can sometimes happen even on a local level with certain issues. You get, you know, we've seen, you know, I've talked to people who've gotten burned out. You know, they didn't get policies they wanted, or it was too much trouble or too much time or whatever, and they get burned out. But I think, you know, it's a tough thing. Politics is a tough thing, right? You just have to keep trucking away, and you know, it's a long road to make a better country and a better community.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? It's just relentless. You have to stay engaged every day, keep up with what's going on, and navigate a series of issues that are not easy to navigate.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
But, you know, the issue, the thing I will say, you know, while it is wonderful that we're not sort of running municipally or, you know, dividing municipally along party lines, I do think we very often divide along you know, particular projects, issues, whatever that is, right? And while that is good that brings people out, those people tend to really disappear again, right? Like, you know, as a counselor, you know, and I see this, you know, whatever the project may be, you know, people they get really engaged
Yeah.
around a particular issue, but they have a real big tendency to go away, and we're back to the same
Single
two
issue
people
voters.
in
Yeah.
council chambers with us
I know.
again,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I wanted to.
We all know who those two are.
I'm glad you brought that
Bless
up because I wanted to ask about, in the absence of voting along Democratic Republican lines in Newburyport for councilors, for mayor, whatever, I do think that we have lines that we construct that we do vote along.
Yeah.
And I don't know if those are maybe development or fiscal responsibility, how we spend our taxes, waterfront west, education. People care about certain things and they fall into camps.
Yeah.
And they're not political parties in the traditional sense, but they almost feel like political parties. And when you look at people's lawn signs, there tends to be groupings
For sure.
of people who they support who share similar ideological goals.
And then you see
And-
some that don't match, and you're like, what is that with that person?
Yeah, I like
It
that.
is
That's
true.
interesting.
I will look. I'll be like,
Yeah.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
But the good and bad in that is, so I would argue that it does not tend to be around fiscal responsibility or or fiscal ideology. Let's say it that
Okay.
way. Because I wish that were more the case. It tends to, for me as a counselor, I see people build around projects around a thing, and let's use Waterfront West because that's more future tense, and I don't want to get into the sort of things that we've already been through. But I did live through Waterfront West 6 years ago when we were dealing with it. I wasn't even on council. I wasn't even thinking about being on council at the time. But I went to a lot of the meetings, and wow, people were losing their minds in one direction and losing their minds in the other direction. And I think we're probably going to see that all over again, right? But the people will come out, and at least my view of it is a lot of people come out because someone else told them to come out, right? Like someone else has an issue. We'll go back to Susie, right? Like Susie's my neighbor, and so I say, hey, Susie, we're going to have a meeting on Waterfront West tonight, and we want to do nothing there. Make it stay as a gravel boat yard, right? And so you got to come to the meeting and say, keep a gravel boat yard with me. And so, I feel like there's a lot of people who do that, but then Susie and maybe even I go home and don't come back for the next issue.
So people get riled up about a specific issue, they advocate, they go out, they hold signs, whatever, and then once the issue is resolved one way or the other,
Exactly.
they disappear until the next issue comes up, and there might be some ideological consistency, but maybe not. And
There's
it's just
a few people that are there for the Project X and Project Y, but very few of them.
Interesting.
But what I see, so some of the projects that we've had, we'll fill council chambers about a particular thing, right? And then, like I say, the next council meeting, there's two people in the audience again, right? And then we come to the budget season, and, the budget is everything, right? Not only is it everybody's opportunity to really learn the city in its entirety, right? Because just a small plug here, but as the council reviews the budget, the administration submits the budget, and then the council, of course, holds the purse strings. And so we hold a series of meetings where we bring each department in. The department head explains what their, key milestones have been over the last year. So what they've accomplished in the last year, what their budget looks like, what their structure is, how many people they have, all of that, and what they're looking for in the next year, and what their goals are for the next year. So you can learn, what is it that the planning department does? How many people are in the planning department? How much money did they make did they take last year? What are they looking for next year? How does that differ? Is that the right investment? Crickets. It's the council, and that's it in chambers for those discussions,
Right.
It's
not flashy. It's not-
and
yeah.
everybody can complain that I pay too much taxes, but that's where your taxes are coming from,
Right.
And nobody's
It's
really
easier
paying
to-
attention.
No, go ahead.
I will say on the budget, I think it's, and they do. There's 20. I'm estimating, but there's 20 budget meetings, right? In May and June every year, and they go through all these. But the problem I always have with the budget is okay, if you want to cut in the budget, okay, you go and talk and propose for a cut. But as a member of the public, but if you basically all the decisions, all the budgetary decisions are made at one final meeting in June, and they have public comment where they hear from the public, but then only after public comment do you hear the proposals, the proposed amendments, the proposed cuts to the budget. Right,
okay.
so the public then has no input, and oftentimes, and without any violation of the open meeting law, councilors are lobbying behind the scenes for cuts and everything else, and I think if I'm a member of the public, why am I going to show up if there's no ability for me to actually, if I care about a topic and I don't want cuts there's no ability for me to have any knowledge prior to it actually occurring.
Right.
Whether it's going to happen and to make any comment, let alone lobby my counselor and call my ward counselor and say no, don't cut this. And I think that the budget process, I really wish that a week ahead of time, all the proposals would come in. So at the very least, okay, you can get an army together in a week if you need to, but you can't if there's no opportunity at all to do that. I don't know if what your view is on that.
Connie, change it. You got 3 months left. Yeah, fix it.
But no budget season left.
Yeah, but no budget season left. So I would argue that coming, let's say you wanted to make a cut to planning and development, since we were already picking on them, right? I would say planning and development, again, the way that we digest the budget through the budget meetings is by departments, right? So come during that. You can certainly make public comment. You can always reach out to all 11 city councilors and say, cut this or don't cut that, whatever that is, right? But there is ability to make input into the process. I agree with you, and believe me, it is very hard for us as councilors. This year, the budget meeting went literally until 11:58 at night, because the next day happened to be a federal holiday, and so we could not go past midnight that particular night. Not that I wanted to, but the joke on the council is I like to go to bed at 9:30 at night, so I'm always very upset when council meetings go late. But I agree with you. It is really hard. But we, even as councilors, as Jared says, because of open meeting law, we cannot speak to more than 4 other councilors at any time on any particular issue. Because as the 5th councilor, if I were to move to 6, then I'm over the majority of the council, and then it has to be a, structured meeting and all those things, right? But so it's true. We do a lot of horse trading in the background, right? But at the night of the meeting, I don't even know. This particular year, we were asked by the chair of Budget and Finance, who manages that budget process for the council, to come to the meeting with at least our proposed cuts on a piece of paper, so that not only the other councilors at the beginning of the meeting know what you're going to anticipate doing. Also, frankly, the poor finance director who has to sit there on his computer and try to figure it all out, because at the end of the day we have to vote on it at the end of the night, and he has to be able to sort of read that back to us. And so we were all asked to do that, but of the 11, I was the only one that actually did it, So I'm running around, passing around paper at the beginning of the meeting, and ultimately I was really the only one who proposed a lot of cuts. But it's even we don't know, and it's a clunky process, but just the way open meeting law happens, it's really hard to structure it another way.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we got to wrap up.
No! Seriously?
I just got the warning from Maeve.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I would love
that
to.
went fast.
We could keep talking for a long time. I got all these points I didn't get to make.
All right, pick your favorite one.
We do have 5 more minutes, though.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we covered a lot. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I do want to run down a list of some dates that people can keep in mind for staying informed. There's the Townie hosted meet and greet at Riptide Cafe at 6 p.m. this Wednesday, October 8th. And then there is, I'll let you talk about that.
On October 14th, the NDCC, we're holding our Democratic Candidate Forum at the Public Library at 7 p.m. So.
Okay. And on October 20th, we have the Townie hosted Ward 2 debate between Stephanie Nikitich and Sean Fenn, and a at-large debate on the 26th at the Unitarian Universalist Church. Details TBD. So
and I also think Local Pulse is also having several forums, so you can listen on the radio and hear there.
Great.
If you want to listen.
Are you having a Ward 6 debate as well on the Townie?
There is no Ward 6.
Okay.
There was a Ward 6 on Local Pulse debate
the
before,
primary.
during the primary. So it'd be great if someone figures something out, but I don't know if
There's a lot going on.
I don't have the capacity to do that.
Yeah.
Things are getting booked up pretty quick. but yeah, no, the more events out there, the better, I think. And
Yeah. And there is a mayoral debate.
There is a mayoral
coming as well,
debate
right?
On the 22nd.
that is on the 22nd. At
I believe that's at the Knock.
at
Yes,
the
the
middle
Knock
school.
Auditorium. You're right.
Yes. These dates will all be very clearly laid out somewhere. That's much easier to remember and digest than we've just done it.
So there's lots of opportunities
Yes.
for people to go out, see the candidates,
Yes.
Yeah.
and get
I will
involved.
also say for anybody who can't make all 10 of those dates, reach out to the candidates. Ask them. Their emails are out there somewhere in the world. You know, Google their name, whoever it is you want to talk to and understand more from. I can guarantee you that people are going to get back to you because they are anxious to get your vote, right? And ask people, do not be afraid to ask people. You know, yes, people are very, very busy, but ask people where they stand on the issues.
Even if they're
Know that.
uncontested.
Even if they're uncontested.
Yeah.
Understand, you know, especially if they're going to represent you in your ward, ask them. Get educated. You have a right to know who your elected officials are and where they stand on particular issues.
Great place to end. Thanks again, Connie and Jared, for coming on.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks to Maeve, our producer, and Sarah Hayden. And we'll catch you all next month on
Appreciate
Between
it.
the Lines.
And I love everything you're doing with the Townie.
Thank
It's
you.
really
Thank
welcome.
you. I appreciate that.